Sign it, Nora, and disappear from my son's life tonight.
What is this?
A check. $5 million. Take it and vanish.
You're paying me to leave my husband?
I'm paying you to erase yourself. Because your skin, your presence, is a stain on our reputation.
Excuse me.
My son is a Sinclair heir. You are a distraction.
Ethan, tell me she's joking.
Mom, handle it.
I am your wife.
On paper.
Even he remembers your place. People like you don't build legacies. You contaminate them.
I love your son.
It's just a conversation. Don't make it dramatic.
Dramatic?
Sign the separation agreement.
And if I refuse?
And it's like, yeah, you'll leave with nothing.
I can't tell him.
Just sign it, Nora.
Done.
Pack your things and leave through the back door. I don't want you ruining our reputation.
I'm sorry. Mommy has to protect you alone.
Nora didn't look back when she stepped out into the rain that night. The mansion doors closed behind her with a finality that echoed louder than the storm itself. It wasn't just a house she was leaving. It was a life she had built with quiet devotion, one that had slowly stripped her of dignity piece by piece. For years, she had tried to fit into a world that never wanted her, tried to earn love that was never freely given, tried to become someone else, just to be accepted. But in the end, none of it mattered. Because the moment she was asked to disappear, she realized something terrifying. She already had. The rain soaked through her clothes as she walked aimlessly, her suitcase dragging slightly behind her. Her hand rested protectively over her stomach, as if shielding the tiny life inside her from a world that had already proven itself cruel. She had planned to tell Ethan that night, planned to share the one piece of news that might have changed everything. But fate had a different ending in mind, or perhaps a better beginning. The accident happened so suddenly it felt unreal. A sharp screech, a violent crash, and then silence. For a brief second, Nora froze. She had nothing left. No home, no family, no certainty about tomorrow. It would have been easy to walk away, but something in her refused to become as cold as the people she had just left behind. So she ran toward the wreckage. The man inside the car was barely conscious, blood mixing with rainwater as it streamed down his face. Nora didn't hesitate. Fear took a back seat to instinct as she struggled to pull him free, her hands trembling but determined. She stayed with him until help arrived. She didn't ask who he was. She didn't expect anything in return. And that was exactly what changed her life. By morning, everything had shifted. The man she had saved wasn't just anyone. He belonged to a family far more powerful than she could have imagined. And the woman who came to see her at the hospital carried a presence that demanded attention without ever raising her voice. She studied Nora carefully, as though weighing something beyond the surface. Gratitude was there, but so was curiosity. When she learned Nora had nowhere to go, something unexpected happened. Instead of offering money, she offered a place. At first, Nora hesitated. Kindness, in her experience, always came with conditions. But this time, it didn't. No insults, no judgment, no reminders that she was less than. Just an opportunity. The transition wasn't easy. She carried her past like a shadow, always expecting it to catch up with her. But slowly, things began to change. For the first time, Nora was encouraged instead of criticized. She was taught, guided, and challenged, not broken down. She learned how to navigate business, how to speak with confidence, how to hold her ground in rooms filled with powerful people. And with every passing day, the woman she used to be faded further into the background. Then came the day her child was born. Everything shifted again, but this time, in the most powerful way. Holding her baby in her arms, Nora felt something she hadn't felt in years. Not fear, not doubt, but purpose. This wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about building a life where her child would never feel unwanted, never feel small, never question their worth. And for that, she was willing to become someone entirely new. Years passed, not slowly, but steadily, each one shaping her into someone stronger, sharper, and unrecognizable to those who once knew her. The softness in her didn't disappear, it evolved. It became controlled, intentional, powerful. By the time she stepped into that grand hall 7 years later, Nora was no longer the woman who had walked out in the rain. She carried herself with quiet authority, her presence commanding attention without effort. People noticed. They always did. But no one was prepared for what came next. Across the room, Ethan stood beside his new wife, completely unaware that his past had just walked back into his future. He had moved on, or at least, he believed he had. Built a life that looked perfect from the outside, until the moment he saw her. Recognition didn't come immediately. It crept in slowly. First confusion, then disbelief, and finally, something deeper, something heavier. Vanessa noticed it too. The shift in the air, the tension, and when her eyes landed on Nora, something unspoken passed between them. Not shock, not fear, but resistance. Because even without a word being spoken, she understood one thing clearly. This was not the same woman she had dismissed years ago. Then the announcement came. Clear, unavoidable, final. Nora wasn't just present in that room. She was in charge of it. The silence that followed wasn't just surprise. It was realization. The kind that arrives too late to change anything. Ethan felt it first. The weight of every decision he had made. Every moment, he had chosen silence over loyalty. Every time he had underestimated her. And for the first time in his life, he didn't know what to do. Vanessa, however, reacted differently. Where Ethan hesitated, she calculated. Because power recognizes power. And what stood before her now was no longer something she could control. But the real moment, the one that shattered everything, came quietly. Soft footsteps, a small voice, and a single word that changed the atmosphere completely. Mommy. The child ran toward Nora without hesitation, wrapping small arms around her as if the world outside her didn't exist. And in that moment, everything connected. The timeline, the absence, the truth. Ethan didn't need confirmation. He felt it, deep in his chest. A realization so heavy it nearly broke him. Because the woman he had let go hadn't just moved on. She had built a life, a legacy, a future, without him. And now, she stood above him, untouchable, unreachable, and completely out of his control. For the first time, Ethan understood what it meant to lose something you could never replace. And Nora? She didn't look at him with anger. She didn't look at him with pain. She simply looked at him, like he no longer mattered. And somehow, that hurt the most. That night, long after the event ended, Ethan sat alone, replaying every moment in his mind. But one question refused to leave him. Not about the company, not about her success, but about the child. Because deep down, he already knew the answer. If this story is pulling you in already, don't forget to like and tell me where you're watching from. I want to see how far Nora's story is reaching. That night, sleep didn't come easily to Ethan. The silence in his penthouse felt unfamiliar, almost suffocating. Every corner of the room reminded him of something he couldn't undo. Not the business deals, not the expectations, but her, Nora. For years, he had convinced himself that what happened back then was necessary. That it was easier to let things go than to fight a battle he didn't want to face. Now, sitting alone in the dark, he realized something painfully simple. It hadn't been easier. It had just been cowardly. Across the city, Nora stood by the window of her high-rise apartment, her child asleep in the next room. The city lights stretched endlessly before her, glowing like quiet reminders of how far she had come. 7 years ago, she had walked into the unknown with nothing but fear and determination. Now, she stood at the top of a world that once rejected her. And yet, there was no bitterness in her eyes. Only clarity. The next few weeks changed everything. Not loudly, not dramatically, but with precision. As the new majority owner and CEO, Nora didn't make emotional decisions. She made strategic ones. And the first thing she did was review every department, every contract, every executive, including Ethan. It didn't take long to uncover the truth. Ethan had never been the strong leader people assumed him to be. Much of his success had been built on inherited influence and quiet cover-ups, mistakes buried under family power. Mistakes Nora now had full access to. She didn't expose him immediately. She didn't need to. Because true power wasn't about destruction. It was about control. Instead, she called for a private board meeting. No media. No audience. Just the people who truly mattered. Ethan knew something was coming the moment he walked into that room. The atmosphere was different. Heavy. Final. Vanessa was already seated, her posture rigid, her expression carefully composed. But there was tension beneath it. For the first time in years, she wasn't the most powerful person in the room. Nora entered last. Calm. Collected. Untouchable. She didn't acknowledge the tension. She didn't acknowledge the past. She simply took her seat and began. What followed wasn't an attack. It was a dismantling. Clear reports. Precise numbers. Decisions backed by undeniable facts. Every weakness in the company's structure was laid out, and every one of them traced back to leadership failures. Ethan's leadership. He didn't interrupt. He couldn't. Because for every excuse that formed in his mind, there was evidence that crushed it before it could leave his mouth. Vanessa tried. Of course she did. She questioned, challenged, pushed back. But this time, authority didn't respond to intimidation. It responded with results. And Nora had both. By the end of the meeting, the decision was no longer a discussion. It was a conclusion. Ethan was removed from his position, not out of revenge, but because he no longer deserved to be there. The silence that followed the announcement was different from the one at the event. This one didn't carry shock. It carried consequence. For the first time in his life, Ethan had to face something he couldn't escape, couldn't charm, couldn't ignore. Accountability. Vanessa's reaction was quieter than expected. There was no outburst. No dramatic denial. Just a long, steady look at Nora. And in that look, something shifted. Not acceptance, but recognition. Because she finally understood what she had created. The very woman she had tried to erase had become stronger than anything she could control. Days later, she came to see Nora, not as a superior, not as an enemy, but as someone standing on the outside for the first time. The meeting was simple. No audience. No power plays. Just two women and the weight of everything between them. Vanessa didn't apologize immediately. It wasn't in her nature. But when she finally spoke, her voice lacked the sharpness it once carried. I underestimated you. Nora didn't respond. She didn't need validation from the past. I thought removing you would protect my son, Vanessa continued. There was a pause. A rare one. He lost more than I ever intended. Nora held her gaze. Calm. Unshaken. That wasn't my doing. And that was the truth. She hadn't destroyed anything. She had simply stopped allowing herself to be destroyed. Vanessa exhaled slowly, as if accepting something she could no longer fight. Then, for the first time, she let go. Ethan, however, wasn't as composed. Losing his position wasn't what broke him. Seeing Nora walk away without looking back was. He tried to reach out. More than once. Messages left unanswered. Calls never returned. Because some distances aren't created by space. They're created by choices. The final time he saw her wasn't at the company. It wasn't in a meeting. It was somewhere much quieter. A park. Late afternoon. Their child laughing softly in the distance, completely unaware of the history, standing just a few steps away. Ethan approached slowly, as if any sudden movement might break the moment. Nora noticed him. Of course she did. But she didn't tense. Didn't retreat. Didn't soften. She simply waited. For a long time, he said nothing. Because for once, words weren't enough. I didn't know, he finally said. It wasn't a defense. It wasn't an excuse. Just a truth he had come to hate. Nora nodded slightly. I know. That was what made it heavier. Because this wasn't about ignorance anymore. It was about what he chose when it mattered. He glanced toward the child, something fragile flickering in his expression. Do I have a place in their life? The question hung in the air. Not desperate. Not demanding. Just honest. Nora didn't answer immediately. She watched her child for a moment, then looked back at him. Their life will never be built on absence, she said calmly. A pause. But it will never be built on broken promises either. It wasn't a yes. It wasn't a no. It was something harder. Something that required time, consistency, and truth. And for Ethan, that was the real consequence. Not losing Nora, but having to earn something he once threw away. As the sun began to set, Nora stood. Her child ran back to her, slipping their small hand into hers without hesitation. Security, trust, love, everything she had fought to build. Ethan watched them, not with regret alone, but with understanding. Because now he knew. Love wasn't something you assumed would stay. It was something you protected. Or lost. Nora didn't say goodbye. She didn't need to. Some endings don't require closure. Just acceptance. And as she walked away, one thing was clear. She had never truly lost anything that night she left. She had found herself. The woman they tried to erase didn't come back for revenge. She came back as a reminder that losing her was the greatest mistake they would live with forever. Be honest. After everything, does Ethan deserve a place in her life? Comment yes or no. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and comment.
If you've ever been treated like you don't belong,